Good morning, everyone. This morning, we're joined by University Professor Edith Weiss of our Georgetown University Law Center, who's been a member of our Georgetown faculty since 1978. And Edie, I'm so grateful to you for taking the time to be a part of our conversation series, and it's a pleasure to have this chance to be together. Let's jump right in. Among your numerous areas of expertise, you are one of the world's leading scholars of international environmental law. Can you talk a little bit about how you came to focus on this area of the law and how it has changed over the course of your legal and academic career?
Thanks, Jack. It's an honor to be here today with you. I grew up in the Northwest, and so there was always a concern about our relationship to the natural environment. And I realized that that was a question that was common to all countries, and it was also international. So in the early 1980s, I developed a course at Georgetown Law School on international environmental law. And at that time, there was an early focus on transboundary issues, air and water pollution, specific animals such as whales, fur seals, and polar bears. And then in 1972, we held the first International Environmental Conference and the Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment. And that led to lots more activities. It led to the establishment of the first international organization, United Nations Environment Program, regional seas, conservation of endangered species, and global issues such as chemicals that deplete the stratospheric ozone layer. And then we take our next sort of jump, which is 1992, 20 years later in Rio, where now the focus is on environment and development. And there's a broad expansion of what constitutes international environmental law. Climate change, biodiversity conventions, trade in chemicals, forests, and a Rio Declaration of Principles for international environment and development. We also had a big development then of procedures that needed to be followed, access to information, environmental impact assessment remedies, and we began linking environment with other disciplines, environment and trade, environment and human rights, and indeed the late John Jackson and I taught courses on environment and trade. And there was a focus on negotiating new binding agreements. And then we turned to 2012, again, Rio. And there we find an expansion of who has to take the action, from states to also including the private sector, public-private partnerships, states within countries and provinces within countries, non-governmental organizations, local people, other movements, a big expansion of legal instruments from just binding legal instruments to legal instruments that aren't technically binding, to voluntary individualized commitments, as in the Paris Agreement of 2015, and a new focus on compliance with agreements. And climate change now is really the ultimate expansion of all the things that could be included with an international environmental natural resources law, including water.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you. Now, you're the author of the influential book, In Fairness to Future Generations, International Law, Common Patrimony, and Intergenerational Equity. The idea of intergenerational equity, that we should leave the planet in no worse condition than we received it, has only grown more urgent in the decades since your book was published. What sort of progress do you see has been made towards creating the laws or infrastructure that would protect our planet for future generations? What work do you think is most important to focus on now?
A lot of progress has been made. We realize we have to give voice to the interests of future generations. And there has been progress in three areas. And the first is in domestic legislation that countries pass that mention and reference and provide for future generations, Australia, New Zealand, and others. There are constitutional provisions in at least 55 states, meaning countries, that have provisions related to future generations. They're generally obligations, but some also have rights for future generations. Very importantly, we have real advances in judicial litigation, in national courts and lower courts. Cases in more than 20 countries have dealt with future generations. And let me give you two examples that are very pertinent. Sure. In India, in 2017, the Indian Supreme Court, in a case that involved large-scale mining in Odisha, ordered the government to update and issue a new national minerals policy. The policy provides that resources, natural resources that include minerals, are a shared inheritance where the state is a, quote, trustee on behalf of the people, unquote, And it includes a new section for the first time on intergenerational equity.
Wow.
And the Supreme Court of Colombia addressed problems of deforestation in the Amazon, and it ordered the government to formulate an intergenerational pact for the life of the Colombian Amazon, noting that the natural resources were shared by everyone today, but also future generations. And much earlier, the Philippines Supreme Court gave standing to children to represent the interests of future generations. And finally, there's been a lot of progress on implementing institutions by countries to consider the interests of future generations in decisions. This includes in Finland, Wales, Hungary, Tunisia, formerly in France with the Cousteau formation there, and much discussion about ombudspersons for future generations at both the national and international level. Big developments since 1988.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Now, you served as chair of the World Bank's inspection panel. Can you tell us a little bit about that role and how your work there intersected with some of the concepts you've written about, such as accountability?
Yes, I was very honored to be able to serve as the chair of the inspection panel. That responds to complaints by two or more people, it's always a lot of them, that they are harmed or could be harmed by World Bank finance programs because the bank hasn't followed its policies and procedures. It is the ultimate in accountability, and it gives voice to those people, most importantly. The process of accountability, I found, is actually a dynamic process. We think of it as a statement of obligation, carrying it out or not carrying it out, and usually sanctions as a penalty. But I think it really needs to be reconceived as a dynamic process so that when asked a question, why hasn't a party followed the policies or the obligations that it's supposed to? And if it's a lack of capacity or lack of resources or bad intentions, those call for different measures. And there's also, most importantly, I found a learning element to the dynamic process of accountability, so that you learn from holding others accountability, and those that are held accountable learn from that process and can do things differently. So it was a real honor to be able to listen really to the people whom the World Bank is supposed to be helping and serving.
Oh, thank you. Now, you've referred to our modern world as kaleidoscopic, ever-changing, which has significant repercussions for sustainable development and work to establish and maintain environmental protections. Could you share with us a little bit about this idea, and what do you think are the most pressing factors affecting this work today?
Yeah, the kaleidoscopic world, vision a kaleidoscope, potentially lots of handles on the kaleidoscope.
Sure.
Rapid change, new and challenging problems, lots of diverse actors, including not only governments, but the private sector, formal, informal groups, networks, and billions of individuals, and who can communicate instantaneously across the world, and changing patterns of interaction among these various groups. And I think there are three major developments that have facilitated this. One is the globalization of economic and financial sectors. A second is really the widespread dispersion of information and communication technologies to all regions. And third, the dispersion of dangers, the disease, climate change, potentially synthetic biology, potentially geoengineering, cyberspace, artificial intelligence. And what the kaleidoscopic world has is bottom-up empowerment. But it also has more ability for top-down control and a greater chance for states or others to grab a handle on the kaleidoscope. So the old pattern, the hierarchy of states down to the local level and horizontally among states, I think doesn't quite suffice now. And my argument has been that in this world, which potentially has some anarchy built into it, that if we're going to protect the environment, we need common shared values and norms that reflect these values that are essential for the glue for the kaleidoscopic world, such as cooperation, avoiding human dignity and equity, intergenerational equity, and accountability. And the last makes implementing the norms effective. And here I want to take the occasion to really praise the encyclical, Our Common Home. It makes such a difference. It really states so forcefully our moral obligation to care for what is our common shared home for the future, but also tells us that we really have to address the economic, social, and environmental justice issues today if we are be able to transport a good environment to the future, our common home.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Now, In addition to your role with the World Bank, you've held several leadership positions that operate on a global stage, including as Associate General Counsel for International Law, the Environmental Protection Agency's International Law Division, and you've been president of the American Society of International Law. Can you share with us what you've learned about work that requires coordination and cooperation across nations to address international issues like climate change?
Well, the first thing I think I've learned is that you cooperate when you are locked into the same system over time, and you can only avoid escalating harm or an ever worsening situation if you're going to cooperate. It's not a zero-sum game. You also can cooperate if there are benefits to be gained from that you really couldn't achieve otherwise. And protecting the planet, as I said, is something we need to cooperate on. It's not a zero-sum game. Now, for some things, you would need joint efforts. And for other things, you need coordination among states or among entities that are doing their own efforts to try and address this problem to achieve a common goal. I think it becomes apparent that we need to base our actions, especially in climate change, on science, on the best science. And we need to have ways to respond to our changes in our understanding of the best science. And I put this image of a ship. There's a hole in the ship. It's getting bigger. If we don't cooperate, everyone loses. And by the time we recognize that, it may be too late. And the final thing I would argue about cooperation is we all have to respect each other. That notion of respect is basic to ensuring effective cooperation.
Thank you. I can't thank you enough for taking this time to share these reflections with us. As we close, is there a message you'd like to share with our community?
Yes. I want to share that we have one planet, again, our common home, and it ought to be recognized globally as a key problem of national security. The Council of Elders, established by Nelson Mandela some years ago, led to the doomsday clock of the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists and the threats of climate change and nuclear war. And advanced in January 2020, the clock advanced to 100 seconds before midnight. And so my final message is all of us around the world need to act together globally to have a shared planet, shared common home in good condition with environmental, social, and economic justice for future generations.
Edie, thank you. And again, thank you for being here today with us to share your reflections. It's been a joy to have this time to be together with you. We've been so grateful for all these many years of your leadership in our university community.
Thank you. Thank you. It was an honor and a pleasure.
And I look forward to being with all of you again soon. Take care of yourselves and take care of everyone around you. For every Hoya, everywhere.